Hi, everyone. My name is Ekram Sadar, and I'm the curator at Squeaky Wheel. And thank you all for joining us this evening. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a white or white passing Turkish male with a short beard. And behind me is a large metal sign that says Squeaky Wheel. I'll be briefly talking about this evening, give you some directions and technical notes to guide you, and introduce Johan Diedrick. I would like to begin by stating that Squeaky Wheel and Buffalo, where I am transmitting from, is located in the homelands of the Keepers of the Western Door, the Seneca, member nation of the Haudenosaunee or Six Nations Confederacy. This land is protected by the Treaty of Canandaigua of 1794, and as a settler institution that occupies this land uninvited, Squeaky Wheel commits to learn and implement ways to turn this acknowledgement into action. To those of you who don't know us, Squeaky Wheel is a center for art and technology that provides low-cost equipment rentals, media education for youth and adults, and exhibitions, screenings, and public programs such as this one since 1985. Part of reading this recognition of territory for any of you attending, wherever you may be, is not only building awareness of the very real treaties that are supposed to govern the land that we are on, but also frame how we live and work on colonized land. If you were here on this land where I am 100 years ago, it would have been 1 month since the opening of the 1901 Pan American Exposition. Like many expos from across the Western world, it aimed to sort of showcase nationalist, scientific, and cultural advances and establish supremacy within it, intermixing racist and colonial pavilions within its attractions. In a guide for the exposition from the time, there was a listing for the original amusement ride for A Trip to the Moon, which inspired the famous Méliès film. And that's found sort of squeezed among descriptions for racist pavilions, such as ones depicting life on a plantation or life in the Philippines, which, along with Puerto Rico, Guam, and Hawaii, had recently become colonies of the United States. Before it concluded with the assassination of President McKinley by the anarchist Leon Chocoltz, there was one other pavilion, which reportedly was not written about much at the time. It marked the first time that W.E.B. Du Bois, what are now known as data portraits, were shown in the United States. I presume most of you are familiar with them, but if you are not, there are data visualizations that make visible a wide spectrum of Black experience at the turn of the century and what Du Bois called the color line. These included amazing visualizations that documented the sort of lingering effects of slavery to what he considered sort of advances in education. Du Bois' exhibition only came to the expo through the advocacy and protests of the activist Mary Talbert, who read an essay advocating for its exclusion at the expo at the Michigan Street Baptist Church, just a 15-minute walk away from where I am right now. I was in the initial stages of the research into the Buffalo Exposition and research into sort of these colonial histories of these, large expositions in general, when it occurred to me that this was a moment and a place in which it would be meaningful to show Johann Diedrick's Dark Matters. And through an opportunity presented by Just Buffalo Literary Center's Civil Rights Project, I'm grateful to be able to do so. Dark Matters is an exhibition in our window gallery, an upcoming online project, and series of public events. The window installation and interactive web experience exposes the absence of Black speech in the datasets used to train voice interface systems in consumer artificial intelligence products such as Alexa and Siri. Using storytelling, data visualization, 3D modeling, sound, and extensive research to showcase the algorithmic racism inherent in artificial intelligence, Dark Matters also questions whether inclusion in such harmful network frameworks is a goal worth pursuing. If Du Bois' data portraits make visible Black experiences in the early 20th century, I think Dark Matters also asks if that kind of visibility is something to be desired and for whom. As we are sort of talking about years and years, I want to state what an absolute honor it is to be able to welcome back Johann's work to Squeaky Wheel a year since his virtual pandemic residency with us. And even a year later, I still haven't met him in person, and I can't wait to meet him in person. This is the opening of Dark Matters. However, I do want to once again extend my gratitude to Just Buffalo Literary Center, both for supporting this project, but also leading a youth workshop led by Richmond Wills, which began earlier this week. There is one more session coming up this upcoming Tuesday, and it is open to youth aged 12 to 21. If that is you or someone you know and you are near, I highly encourage you to attend the second session. I heard the first one was absolutely wonderful. And I'll be posting a link to that in the Google Doc. Speaking of the Google Doc, you can click on the link below, which goes to a document where you can leave responses and questions to the artist. Choose yourself a font, a color, leave comments, and please be cool. Please abide by our community guidelines. And as always, we do ask you to be mindful of coming from different lived experiences. If you're having any technical trouble, do feel free to send us a text message at the number below. This video that you're watching online is available for 24 hours for anyone who's signed up, and 72 hours for Squeaky Wheel members. And if you're not a member yet, it's always a good time to be a Squeaky member. And you can find that in the footer of the document. Finally, it's nice to have you all here. And if you feel like taking a screenshot of your screen and telling us how you may be enjoying this event, do tag us at Squeaky Buffalo on Twitter or Instagram. This program was funded in part by the County of Erie and County Executive Mark Poloncarz and the New York State Council of the Arts with the support of Governor Andrew M. Cuomo and the New York State Legislature, individual members, businesses, and supporters such as yourself. I want to thank Brian Lee and El Museo Gallery for the help in mounting the exhibition earlier. And I also want to thank Angela Johnson of Invest in Access for securing ASL interpretation for this evening's session. Jonathan Webb, thank you so much for being with us. Now I will introduce Johan. Johann Diedrick is a Caribbean-American artist, engineer, and musician who makes installations, performances, and sculptures for encountering our world through your ears. He surfaces vibratory histories of past interactions, inscribed in material and embedded in space, peeling back sonic layers to reveal hidden memories and untold stories. He shares his tools and techniques through listening tours, workshops, and open source hardware and software. He is the founder of A Quiet Life, a sonic engineering and research studio that designs and builds audio-related software and hardware products for delightfully encountering our environment and each other. He's a 2021 Mozilla Creative Media Award recipient, a member of New Inc., and an adjunct professor of NYU's ITP program. His work has been featured in Wire Magazine, MusicWorks Magazine, and presented at MoMA PS1, Somerset House, Social Kitchen, Common Ground, Recess, the Knockdown Center, and Pioneer Works. Please welcome Johann Diedrick. Woo, big applause.
Thank you so much, Dr. So glad to, almost a year, since we got to do this kind of chat like this before. So yeah, just deeply honored for the opportunity to show my work through Squeaky and with you, and just really excited to be here and talk with you tonight.
I am, similarly, delighted and honored to be able to host your work. The installation's running very smoothly. I know I'm going to be staying here till like around 10 p.m. tonight because I can't wait to see what it looks like when it gets dark out. But I'm curious if you'd like to sort of start off our conversation perhaps by both talking about the project and whether you'd like to show excerpts already or, the mic is yours. I'd love to hear you. I always love hearing you talk about dark matters, from all our phone conversations. So I'm just excited for right now.
Yeah, so maybe let's do. I'll briefly introduce the work, and then we can. I can show about a 5-minute excerpt of the video piece, and then we can come back and just start to spiral from there. The work is called Dark Matters, and it is the series of works. I think at this point it's kind of evolved in a lot of different ways, but a video piece and a soon-to-be revealed or released interactive web experience that spotlights the absence of Black speech in data sets that are used to train voice recognition systems such as Google Home, Siri, and Alexa, and really working to examine the racial bias that it produces, that these systems produce. Sort of a key insight, and we can talk more about it, but it's this idea that for lots of Black Americans and Black English speakers and people coming to the United States with accented forms of English and different kind of forms of English from the African diaspora, there is this element of code switching that happens when Black people change their way of speak, in this case for white ears. But what I was noticing with the way in which my family was interfacing with these technologies was that they were modulating their voice now for AI ears. And so the work is really kind of starting with, why is that the case? Why is this happening? Why is it so similar to this other kind of racially informed exclusion that happens in speech? And that really is where the work begins. And so what I'll do is I'll show about a 5-minute excerpt of the video that's playing now in Squeaky's storefront windows, and then we can just dig in a bit more with that. Cool. So let me share my screen, and yeah, I'll get that going. Okay. That looks good. All right.
Of long service and many battles.
Herring-like fish are the most important fish group on the planet. Some of them joined the lessons which you gave in summer in Weimar. Speakers from the floor may be members or guests.
The legal system in the colony was thereafter based around the English common law. Butterflies, moths, bees, flies, and beetles are known pollinators. The area of present-day Nagiso was part of ancient Sanyo province.
Thin rolls of paste prepared of flour, cheese, yolks of eggs, sugar, and saffron. Unfortunately, the choice is permanent.
It is the recommended first choice for hemodialysis access. Y has a cricket team with more than one side. He also helped build most of the existing buildings on campus.
An African American female in a silver knee-length skirt walking. A white dog runs through a field. A young boy laying on a hospital bed with his leg over the side.
1 year later, Magnus finished a new full story of the magazine Orient Express. He was often billed as a ragtime Texas. The band also toured new countries on Silverthorne, including Australia, Korea, and Taiwan.
Obake Karuta is an obsolete variation of Iroha Karuta unique to Tokyo. It was further resolved that this person should be inviolable. Castellesi was born at Corneto and was sometimes known as Adriano Castellesi da Corneto.
A country estate.
The hotel gives some complimentary water bottles to drink. As he couldn't prove his innocence, he was brought to the detention zone as if guilty.
Before him was an enormous white horse, rearing over him with a frightening scream.
These all offer wilderness, camping, and hiking. Soon played the drums on the album himself. The island's main economy is tourism, as cruises from the mainland are regular.
I found myself alone and saw the people on the other side of the pit.
Codes. Nigel, play Maroon 5 radio.
Every third song is Radiohead, a spiraling, dizzying array of synthesized and cyber-spliced memories, cascades from earbuds and deck ports and vibrating black boxes on off-white kitchen tables, while a befuddled mash of a slowly blaspheming pasta turns to mush on the stove. You worked here for years. You did acid once in the break room by accident. The intern, who looked like a third-generation Hanna-Barbera cell trace of Shaggy overlaid with Adidas slides and frost-tipped, brought the brownies that day. And, bruh, you were tripping balls, man. In Moorman's office, you sweat, the heat from his breath foaming an aura at his lips, turning into a bright-ass sun, an orb that unfolds itself. Moorman's voice sounded like a goddess now. I'm sorry, your inquiry produced no results. Perhaps a search in English? She's glowing, as if Venus was an ember, symmetrical digigoddess, amorphous and anti-gender, a voice made of light and fire. Are you listening to me? Moorman's voice demanded, crackling with brimstone. He smelled like shit cigars and wet dog, his face a pasty rubber, an Alec Baldwin character aged badly by Jersey Mike's number 17 and Sierra Mist. At your desk, you type in data for rich white dudes and keep your head down unless it's Darren's birthday again and the ladies in accounting want you to sign their ridiculous card the size of a roided out Life magazine. They're the last of the ladies who lunch. They sit at cubicles in accounting while tech and creative wander the Disney-esque loft like a third-grade elves at recess, rolling on beanbags and twirling Rubik's Cubes all day until a bright idea hits them. Until their white bones and white bodies, fresh from playing paper origami football on the veranda, has new designs on an app or an upgrade that will make this company $1 billion. You're in data. You try tossing their Nerf balls back at them. You go out of your way to retrieve the errant ping pong balls, tossing them back like, Kobe. They look at you, pity or disgust, then put their paddles down and return to their iPads. Alexa, get me out of here, you say under your breath. It's a request fallen on deaf ears. Alexa's a bitch.
The prints are then delivered to the
Now we're back. Yeah. So that's a 5-minute excerpt from the video piece. And I can talk just a little briefly about like what we're just watching and witnessing. So the first 3 minutes of that excerpt are speech recordings from a publicly available speech data set that's used for research and commercial purposes for speech recognition applications. And so all of those sentences that you hear are being read by participants in a study that have voluntarily shared their voice and are reading, actually, transcribed text that they then just recite. And this data set contains over, 1 million or so of these recordings, and these recordings are what are then fed into machine learning algorithms that are used for, all different kind of speech recognition technologies. The actual bulbs in the center are taken from what are called spectrograms, and these are visual representations of information inside of a recording. More technically speaking, it's showing the frequency energy components of this recording as a function of time. So it's kind of moving from left to right, and you have your horizontal axis is time, your vertical axis is going to be frequency, and you can look at these spectrograms and to a trained eye, you can start to understand maybe what's being said in these spectrograms. And there's a long history of spectrograms and visualizing speech in the history of speech recognition technologies. In this case, I'm using these as more as an aesthetic tool to visualize and spatialize the speech data in these recordings. So they're very dry. Some of them are quite humorous. They just are pulled from so many different types of text, from the very technical to just like quotidian observations during someone's day. And that's what you're seeing is I think it's 1,484 recordings, which is a very small batch of the speech that you would see in this larger data set. On the flip side, kind of inserting itself throughout this rendering of this speech data set are what I'm calling these black voids. This representation of the negative space inside of speech data sets that to me represents what would be black speech data inside of these data sets. And so in contrast to the colorful spectrogram blobs that you saw that are, this purple and pink and orange, and they're kind of moving on a fixed axis, the black void, this metaball, is moving in this very fluid, amorphous, elastic, gooey, gummy sorts of way, which to me really kind of emphasizes and embodies these qualities of black speech, where it's ever changing, it's morphing, it's adaptive, it's resistive, it's resilient. And the voice you're hearing is actually my voice, and I'm reciting a short story written by Alex Smith of the Metropolarity crew down in Philly. Shout out to the crew. And the story that he wrote for this work for me is a second person narration of a engineer that works for a corporation that builds speech recognition technologies. This one's called Nigel, and Nigel's taken over the world, but Nigel also works horribly for Black speech, and this engineer happens to be Black, and so he's working on this technology that doesn't work for him, making tons of money, but also fumbling through very kind of easy everyday activities that he wants to do with this piece. And so I think, as metaphorically standing in for Black speech that's not in these data sets, the short story and the recitation and the content within are placeholders, let's say, for the kind of reality that Black Americans might face when dealing with these technologies, and also giving us some sort of speculative exit to say, like, how do we get out of the situation? How do we think about maybe dismantling these systems or designing and building our AI systems that work better by and for Black people? These type of scenarios kind of exist within that Black void segment. And so, the overall work is about 3 hours, having everyone read out all of the speech, and then interspliced within, you get these moments with the Black metaball story. Random moments. The story is deliberately non-linear, and so you can kind of enter at any point in time. Very much a meditative piece, and I think 5 minutes, 50 minutes, 5 hours with it, you can get a lot of different experiences.
That's certainly what it felt like to me, just sort of sitting here today, like while it was installing and listening, and both sort of listening about the sort of story about the engineer who's one of the people working on Nigel, and also like all of the different recordings that you use. I'm curious. There's so much. I feel like I want to open up, and I want to hear you talk about the project. I think maybe one question is, could you describe in just a bit more detail how the sound recordings that you are presenting are utilized by AI? Or by these sort of like consumer AI systems, like what are these sort of sound files used for? How does that benefit or alter Siri or Alexa, if you will?
Sure. Yeah, there are a few ways maybe to answer that. I think maybe it's good to then just start these systems, these machine learning systems that we have embedded in these technologies, are really classifiers and pattern recognition algorithms, and are really only good at making predictions on data that they've seen before, that then once a new kind of element gets introduced, it'll look back at, I'm speaking very kind of loosely here, but they'll look back at sort of past experiences with other similar kinds of data to direct or make, as best a guess as possible as to what it predicts it would be from a category of say whatever. So, a very kind of a classic example in machine learning is this one experiment around recognizing number digits like 0 through 9. And so what this experiment does is it kind of feeds a bunch of different digits that people have handwritten over and over again, and this algorithm will have seen all of this data, a lot of data, like a huge amount of data for a very, very, very long amount of time. And then when you present it with a 9 that you wrote down, having seen all of these other 9s before, it sort of has, it's learned or embedded some way of recognizing that same pattern in that data to then make out of a number of possibilities, which one to think is the most likely that this input was in this case. And so with the speech data sets, it's essentially the same thing, where you need to train an algorithm on lots of speech data where it can experience or hear or see in some ways all the different possible words that someone could say, so that when you go and you say, Alexa, can you put on the basketball game, it'll be able to parse that sentence and kind of understand, having seen so many versions of the word basketball, I now know that Ekram has said basketball, and I can fulfill whatever request it was, find the game on TV and put it on. So that's not really that's just like a situation that I'm setting up, because what happens is these systems are really only as good and can only really know or predict or function based on the data that they're presented. And so if it's only seen zeros and 0 through 8, and it's never seen a 9 before, and you try to pass it a 9, but it has no idea what to do with that, you're going to get very unpredictable behavior out of this system. And so with facial recognition or object recognition, it'll only ever be able to make a prediction as to what that object is if it's seen that object before, or you fed that data into this system before. So with speech recognition, the big thing is like you have English and all the different words and phrases and sentences, in addition to all the different accents and variations on these words. And that's really whatever is in those data sets is really all that system is going to be able to work well on hearing or predicting or listening to. And if data is not in that data set, then the system is either not going to recognize it, or it's going to recognize it poorly, or it's not as well as it can for other kinds of speech. And so that's I think, yeah.
And yeah, like, and I think one of the things that that's really interesting about the work itself, and I think also makes a lot of sense, is that how you also present it as a double-edged sword as well, of having, is this, the sort of question of like whether these systems should be recognized, whether we want to be part of it, whether it be, within there's a question of like the very usability and representation of like being able to use these systems, but then also like, okay, like, now I'm in Amazon and Google systems, and like there's a sort of like both resistive aspect to it that I find interesting. And I'm curious if you'd like to sort of talk more about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think one would say, I think that it's bad that these systems can't recognize some voices, that it's unusable or a frustrating user experience or a bad user experience for Black people when they want to use this technology. And so let's say you accept that, then there's a techno-solutionist view, which is to say, well, all you need to do now is just feed more data to these systems. You get it more Black speech. It's a data issue. We just need more of that. And many of these companies, these the leading researchers building this, do operate under that logic and are kind of running as fast as possible in that direction. More data will make these systems just work better. And that's definitely sort of like the Google, I think, way of doing things. But I think that comes with both a cost, as you mentioned, and it comes with some anxiety, which is that historically these systems, technological systems, have been used on Black and brown communities as tools of surveillance. And so you could extrapolate this to think about how this would only lead to more kinds of just nefarious use on Black and brown people, and whether or not that's something that we want to welcome, or whether or not that's really a solution or a way forward. So it's definitely a bit of a double-edged sword, and I think then the question might become, to what end, or why do we want to use these tools, or what do we need them to recognize our voice for? Is it to buy more cat litter? Just walking around the house? I mean, yeah, maybe that's pretty cool. Like, is it to become more embedded in Amazon's ecosystem of economic ecosystem? So yeah, I think that's also what's kind of like driving a bit of this work, is to kind of move away from thinking about how do we solve it. I think like what solving means in this context is debatable, but how do we solve this in a way that feels right, and with agency and self-representation kind of still intact at the end of the day.
That actually, I feel like, leads into one of the things we talked about yesterday when we were chatting. What we want to talk about is, like how, well, one of the things I'm both curious to hear you talk about is like both the origins of the work as a sort of interactive project that will be sort of unveiled through at some point within the next couple of months, and also sort of like the project as it developed with Mozilla, and then also, I know we were talking about like what is the question, the questions of like impact on of such as dark matters upon the world, so to speak, and I presume more specifically on how these questions of like how and if these questions of like representation of Black speech within these AI systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can speak, a little bit about I'm trying to think. There's a lot there.
Oh yeah, that was like 3 questions in one.
No, it's totally good. I think the one about the interactive piece right now, I think that the origins, I think, of wanting to do that, or in the intention behind that, is to give people a way to experience what I think is a very abstract and unfortunately mystified set of technologies and just like systems that kind of are that are operating in this scenario. So pulling out just a little bit, then it's at some in realizing what I wanted to do with this work, it was very important to me. I was very excited by the opportunity to open it up as much as I could to as many people as possible in the creation process of this. And as I say that, I feel like I hear artists talk about that a lot, and now I'm wondering if I'm like I'm wondering how well I'm doing that.
Keep going. I want to hear.
Self-critically, but it's I right now, even like what we're doing right now, having this conversation and having this opening and having this public beta iterative rollout of the web experience is an opportunity to receive feedback from the public on the project and to really incorporate as many voices into the conversation and into the, I don't want to say answer or solution just yet, but there's whatever next step forward wants to happen. I know that it's not it shouldn't just be me making that decision. I mean, I think there's definitely some kind of authorship or at least like direction that I have. But I know that it's a larger community level, demographic level kind of problem and conversation that I wanted to have with it. So I just wanted to make sure that, as in different kind of places that I can, and through Mozilla and their support, they've been able to offer me opportunities to host a panel and a workshop at PioneerWorks last week, which brought other people's experts, kind of their voice into the conversation, a more kind of general public who's never, I think, thought about this as a thing, to kind of start pondering on it, and to just get a bit of like collective brainstorming and spiraling and speculating into the work as much as possible, because I don't know if I can or should be the person to necessarily prescribe what needs to happen next. I do have my own ideas, like, for sure, and I think I'm excited to pursue those, but I definitely want to make sure that all the I've checked under every kind of place where I can to make sure that I'm not missing anything, because it's obviously a very kind of it can be, there's so many, there's just a spectrum of experience around this issue that goes beyond just like Black speech, but I think just kind of marginalized speech or speech that's not prioritized or it's an accessibility issue, I guess is what I'm saying. And I see a lot of solidarity in communities that are working on this problem when it comes to different kind of speech impediments and the ways in which they're doing kind of a similar train of thought and experimentation around how to make these devices work better for different ways of speech that isn't normalized or standardized in this way. But the larger impact of the work, it's I think making an artwork to me, especially these days, feels not enough. I think I can say that kind of confidently, and I think what I want to do with this work is really to start a conversation with other people and to bring together some kind of coalition of researchers, engineers that could potentially think through how we could make a hyper localized, decentralized speech recognition technology that works for small communities, regional accents, by and for people that kind of decide to opt into this thing. So that's sort of the deeper impact of the work and where I want to try to move towards as this phase of the project sort of develops. As I have this kernel to now like talk about, I think maybe it's like I don't know if I hate, but I think I also like know it's not as effective to just to talk with your hands waving. It's better to show people something. So now I have something to show people, and I think that becomes this like, we can point and talk about that thing, and the conversation can start there.
I know I was really sort of moved hearing. I also want to reiterate to anyone watching, feel free to leave comments and questions to Johan at any point in the Google Doc, and I'll make sure to go through them and pass them along. Yeah, like I know I was really moved sort of hearing about, sort of you relay how the sort of first workshop went with just Buffalo, and also just sort of like love listening to how the workshop went with Pioneer Works. I'm curious, sort of like if you sort of if there were sort of specific moments that you find that you felt like were sort of like, I almost want to say like prisms that for you opened up the work more in these like workshops, or you're like, boom, like where it sort of like went exactly where you wanted to, or you heard a story or a comment about the work or about these questions that you're attending to in particular, and that you feel comfortable relaying.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the one that kind of comes to me immediately was in the speculative design and Black speech workshop we did. It was organized and run by Silas Monroe and Lauren Williams, two really fantastic critical designers, I would say design theorists, doing really, really fantastic work, especially Silas and their BIPOC design history course, which is just a kind of online, on-demand series of design courses that focus on, they have a course on Du Bois's data visualizations, among other work in there. But the workshop began with us enumerating the different qualities of the Black experience, in particular in Black speech, thinking about what are some qualities of Black speech, what are some Black words, nouns, adjectives, names, and then we constructed a story through Mad Libs, of all things, and they had made these speculative kind of Mad Lib stories around a new app designed for and by Black people, and kind of works differently with Black speech. But it was just a really incredible design exercise, I think, that I had never kind of walked through, and it was very simple. And I think they intentionally did that. So I don't think it didn't really need to be very complicated, but beginning with black experience as the center, as the base of the work that was being produced, generated just these incredible scenarios that, they seemed very fantastical, but also very real too. And so I think maybe, as I'm saying this out loud, like I feel like it made the possibility of this reality more real, and coming through that. And it also it also provided, like, just the methodology seemed to, like, just provide a way that to say, like, how we could do this. Like, this is one way. If we just, like, center and focus on the Black experience, we can make tools and technologies that work better for and by Black people. I think going through that, like, this, experiencing that was really kind of wonderful. And then the Just Buffalo youth writing workshop that I got to sit in on last week was so wonderful. It was such a delightful time, and I'm super grateful for Richie for organizing it and hosting it. But I guess the thing I wanted to share is how that experience reminded me, or I don't know if it reminded me, but maybe just, like, deepened, I don't know, this idea that the work needs to be done, like the work, like this, what, like, anti-oppressive kind, type of work that we do is so necessary, because otherwise these stories get lost, and these narratives get these normalized narratives get embedded so deeply and so deeply entrenched that alternatives, to think alternatively, becomes like a radical act. And in the sense that, like, it's so rare for people to realize that another world is possible, that's what I think, that's what a radical act is in some ways. It's really kind of seeing a possible world that nothing around you would suggest otherwise. And so what I want to, I'll share is that there's one participant in the workshop who was talking about, they were very quick to understand, in how, as much as they could, or whatever the capacities are at the time, racial bias and how discrimination can lead to biased technologies, and also how not having diversity in software engineering and in the pool of engineers who build these technologies really makes it almost impossible for there not to be some sort of racial bias or implicit bias in these things. And they made a comment where they said something about how, inherently all software engineers are white and male. And I just felt really, I don't know if sad's the word, but just kind of, it's just so unfortunate that was this person's, it's all they know. It's all they kind of know. And I had the opportunity to respond, and I said that, white men as software engineers is not the norm. And in fact, in the early days of computing, it was mostly women, and the first computers were Jacquard looms. This lineage of typists and stenographers and clerical work being done by women in offices. They were programmers, and they were working on computers and computing. And it wasn't until, I believe, the 70s or 80s when computing was big business, and white men realized that you can make a lot of money in computing, and so women were pushed out of the industry, and to just remind this young person that it isn't just the norm or an inherent condition of computing that it's just white men. Like it wasn't that, and it totally doesn't need to be either. But that's the work, right? That's like the work that, like, had I not started this and got invited to do this exhibition and being able to hang out in this workshop of Just Buffalo and have that one-to-one conversation with that person, they probably would continue just thinking that that assumption. So I think that just reminds me, or makes me think that it reminds me that the work is important, and the work must be done, or needs to be done by someone. Yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that.
I mean, even I feel like what you just relayed, sort of like when we were talking yesterday about sort of the transformative possibilities of that we want our artworks to be. Like, it sounds like you're already doing it. Like, and I understand, like, the sort of
in a small way
as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, is that something you'd like to talk about more?
About,
like, your sort of hopes for the work, and what you think. I think it's really, I love how intentional you are. I think it was the brilliant curator Abby Sun, who was sort of talking about that there's like a sort of like a trend in documentary circles, at least. And I do feel like there's a very good argument to also read your work within a documentary context as well. But it's sort of like to talk about works that sort of like include like multiple voices and things and like that, but like they don't necessarily sort of like do that. Whereas your work very intentionally does do that. And it's clear that these are very, the way you are inviting people into the work is like really to help sort of transform it, as well as sort of to move it forward. So yeah, I'd love to sort of hear about what you think, what you want, what you believe the sort of like future of the work to lie toward, go towards.
Yeah, I have dreams of this is just a jumping off point, this work, I think. And I think it's a lot more about liberation technologies and alternative realities. I think there's a more practical answer, which is, I would like to work more on this type of machine learning bias creatively, professionally. I have my background is so much in audio and sound and creative possibilities within it and technical work, and so this actually has felt very true. It felt very much like where I'm doing what I should be doing, and where I sort of need to be. And I think just going a bit deeper and I think working with other researchers and engineers at other foundations that might want to help support this work, and not just have it sit or stay in the realm of speculation, but moving it in more towards the realm of reality. Maybe like the off the record answer is like, I want VC money, and I want to start my own like engineering research and development arm in the company, or my own company, or within the company that I'm working with right now. But really take it seriously and really kind of think about how we can, not just make work about scenarios and have people think, oh, I didn't know about that, or oh, that sucks, or oh, I wish we could do something about that, and being like, okay, well, like let's like this is like the engineering you, which is like, yeah, let's work on this, like let's make this happen. And that's been cool. It's been fun kind of meeting other people who are working and thinking about this in other ways. There's a really cool idea kind of being passed around right now around this idea of data unions. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Data unions at all? So the idea of data unions is, well, so what we have currently is this targeted advertising model. That's how a lot of technologies kind of make revenues, is through that, and you don't really have a say. You use the product, you get fed ads, or you use the product, they track how you use the product. They sort of monitor you, and what you click on and what you read and all that kind of things. That gets sold to some third party data auctioneering or sales platform by advertisers who now know that you like Po' Boys and Breath of the Wild, and now serve you ads, and all that. So this idea of data unions is more so, let's like acknowledge the situation and also kind of like shift the power dynamics. So this is one way that it's being done right now. Like, you can install a plugin on your computer that lets you it tracks your data, your usage. You can then give a price to your data, and you and other people can collect your data together, and like a union, and sell it to the highest bidder. So in this case, you are now in control of who gets to buy your data and for what price. And your data is still valuable to these people, so they are still wanting to buy your data. But now in this case, you actually get to determine how much of that data gets sold, and collectively kind of bargain with potential buyers how much that data gets sold for. So I'm curious of like what that might look like for Black speech or Black speech data set, where Black speech users could create a Black speech data set and say to companies like, look, if you want access to this, we want to be compensated for it, and compensated for it well. And this, you could imagine contracts that kind of license it, or however it's used in perpetuity, you continue to make money off of it. So I mean, it still kind of falls within like the realm of capitalism, but I feel like it starts to push that power dynamic a little bit, which I think is kind of interesting, and at least worth thinking a little bit about.
Yeah, and it certainly pushes back against a certain kind of sort of like unpaid constant appropriation, certainly by large companies.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
I love you talking about liberation technologies and arms of VC wings. You know, like, yes, please, somebody give Johann Diedrick millions of dollars to
Please, if
start.
anyone's listening,
Or you know, do you even need millions of dollars to start an underground liberation technology wing? I mean, I guess in a certain sense you do, because you do need the tech and to be able to feed people and, you know, hire people and so on.
yeah, that's the pernicious thing about this problem too, is that it really, it's in the realm of billion-dollar corporations, and I think that's also something that I'm kind of coming to terms with, that like, you know, it's a huge differential when it comes to this issue, and for someone to make a competing system like this, you're going up against, you know, armies, you know, thousands of engineering hours, resources, global scale kind of resources, that type of thing. So that's kind of scary to think about. So I think either something very radical and or something that's comparable. Maybe the radical is the way out, I think.
It's 8:01 p.m. And I think this might be a good place for us to stop.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were sharing each other's Powerball dreams, and your liberation technologies is now part of my Powerball dreams, FYI. For at least, you know, some funds at least. Johan, it's a deep pleasure being able to host your work.
Always. Yes, thank you.
I'm so excited to be able to have it here with us in Buffalo over the next couple of months through September 10th. And for more events hopefully to come, or certainly to come. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Jonathan.
And you know, to all of you watching, thank you all so much for tuning in. And I hope everyone has a lovely and relaxing weekend, and yeah, a relaxing Juneteenth as well. So thank you all.
Take care. Thank you.